Good afternoon, everybody, and a very warm welcome to our webinar, Raising Future-Ready Children in an AI World, What Every Parent Should Know. My name is Gemma Hartley, and I'm the Head of English and Media at EtonHouse International School Orchard. And I'm delighted to be here today, not just as a moderator, but as both an educator and a speaker who works directly with children and families navigating our rapidly evolving digital world. In my classroom and throughout our school community, including conversations we've had with families, I'm witnessing something unprecedented. Artificial intelligence, also known as AI, is no longer a distant concept, and it's already shaping how our children learn and interact with the world. And that brings both incredible opportunities and some valid concerns. We've hosted a webinar on ChatGPT in education in 2023, and it sparked some great conversations with parents. So we felt that this was the right moment to continue the discussion as AI becomes a bigger part of our lives. So today we're fortunate to be partnering with Voyager Education from Hong Kong, and I am delighted to introduce our speaker, Johnson Cheng, founder and CEO of Voyager Education, who has worked extensively with schools across the region to integrate AI in a meaningful and age-appropriate way. So throughout this session today, I'll be sharing insights from my experience as an educator, working directly with students, while Johnson will be bringing the broader perspective of AI implementation across multiple schools and educational contexts. I mean, it's really clear that we are grappling with similar questions, and that's exactly what makes today's conversation so valuable. Knowing which skills to focus on in my child's future. I think a lot of us are here because we're recognizing that AI is becoming part of our everyday lives, and how we can kind of talk about that and discuss that in an ethical and safe way, and what that means for the future. So let's start with the fundamentals. Johnson, many parents hear artificial intelligence and feel overwhelmed or even intimidated. Can you help us understand what exactly is AI and how is it already part of our children's lives?
Thank you so much, Gemma. It's an honor to be here. Let's kick things off by breaking down what we actually mean when we say AI. Well, Stanford defines AI as any system that can perform tasks that usually require human intelligence, like recognizing speech or making decisions. And at its core, AI is just a really good pattern spotter. It learns from large amounts of data and uses that to make smart guesses, like finishing a sentences or recommending the next cartoon. It's already part of our lives. And the truth is, students are already using it. My sons use AI for image generation and data analysis. And as the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, said, I think AI is going to be the key to understanding and solving many of the world's most complex problems. And so our job is not just to help students use AI, but to help them understand it.
Yeah, that's incredibly helpful to kind of ground us in reality rather than science fiction. You know, as an educator and as a parent to two young boys also, I think what's interesting there is about the image generator. And I see that a lot in the classroom when we'll be assigning tasks. The students straight away will go to ChatGPT and or to an image generator. And within moments, it's changing kind of the pace of the lesson or the ideas that they're bringing. As you say there, that it's becoming their go-to platform for resources and ideas. I mean, Johnson, you've mentioned there that AI is already integrated into children's experiences. Can you give us some specific examples of how children are encountering AI in their daily lives that perhaps in ways that we as parents might not even realize?
Sure. I'll start with at home. I see it firsthand. My 9-year-old uses AI without thinking twice. He generates images of dragons and ninjas on Midjourney, getting recommendations from platforms like Epic and Spotify. And he also uses AI to participate in STEM competitions where he builds software prototypes. And just the other day, he created a story about ninjas and warriors and dragons and built on top of that with AI generating images and a storyline, and then he adding on that. So what used to take hours now happens in minutes, and it really, really unlocks his imagination and creativity. At Voyager, we're seeing this with students as well. Our students use AI to help them learn coding, and our AI helps guide them along without giving them direct answers, helps them explore new ideas and stretch their creativity. I think it's very exciting and humbling. We are condensing years of learning into very short periods of time. And it reminds me that as parents and educators, we have a big role to play. We have to help students understand AI, question it, and use it wisely. And I always say that let's not fear AI, because I am very optimistic and hopeful that AI helps us to be better humans.
Yeah, it's a really valid point there, isn't it, about the pace, in this kind of digital age that we're all living in as parents and as educators. The access to information now has dramatically increased. And I think that, as you said there, what a task that would take traditionally longer is now done in a matter of minutes. And it is an exciting opportunity. And I think it kind of lends itself now to skills of how to use AI in a meaningful and responsible way. So if we're going to talk about preparation, Johnson, if we're looking ahead to 10 or 15 years to when today's children are entering the workforce, what skills do you believe will be most crucial for them to develop?
I have a lot of thoughts on this. 10 to 15 years is a bit far out. I mean, even in 5 years' time, the world will be drastically different than where we are today. New jobs will be created, and manual jobs will be replaced, and that's the reality of it. And this trend will only accelerate given the changing global economy and accelerating growth of compute. And so there are several skills that I think students can focus on, especially in this AI era. And I think first is critical thinking. Facts are everywhere. You can ask Perplexity to do research for you easily at your fingertips over WhatsApp. And I think what matters is whether students can ask the right questions, tell what's true, and think for themselves and analyze the facts. And at the end of the day, critical thinking is about analyzing perspectives, different perspectives, and then finding out what's true, right? And when information flying at them 24/7 on Instagram, on the news, I think it's important for them to know how to pause, assess, and think wisely. Second, I think this is the time for curiosity and creativity. These are, I would say, muscles. And if you don't practice them, they atrophy like any muscles. And the more we use them, the more we grow. And so we encourage students to ask wild, even weird questions like, why is the universe still expanding? Why do we use linear algebra and machine learning when so much in life is not linear? Let them explore those questions using tools like ChatGPT, but also ask them to check the sources, cross-reference, and think deeply and ask deeper questions. Third, I think I would say people skills. Those are very important. Empathy and loyalty. And I talk to business owners all the time and employers all the time. And one of the things they say most is people just don't stick around anymore. They're not dependable. AI is more loyal. And so I tell young people that loyalty matters, empathy matters to your team and to your mission and to your values. Show up when it's hard. Be the one that others can count on. I think machines can analyze data, but they don't have human experiences. They don't live our experiences. And so I encourage our students and my boys to really listen and genuinely care and to see things from their perspective. Last, but not least, technical skills. I often say that we should ride technology like it's a bike. We shouldn't be afraid of it. We have to learn to master it. And when you master it, you get so much fun out of it and productivity. So one of the things that's really important, I think, in the age of AI is learning Python. I know a lot of experts out there will say that students should not learn how to program. I respectfully disagree. I think Python is the language of AI, and I think it will enable students to really understand AI, and they'll learn to create. So in the end, in short, I think critical thinking, curiosity and creativity, empathy and loyalty, these are the soft skills they should have, but also they should learn digital literacy, and especially Python.
That's really, really insightful, Johnson. And as a media teacher, you know, I talk all the time to my students about this need for digital literacy. And I know in Sweden, they're big advocates for digital literacy, for empowering the students from a young age to be able to differentiate between real and not real, what's a reliable source as we kind of move them and introduce them more into AI. And this kind of idea of, in the classroom, these essential skills is how to safeguard them, but also allow them to interact with these platforms safely. And as you say, to be curious. We want our children to be curious. We want to foster a sense of critical thinking in a safe environment that we're comfortable with as parents, but also for them to use it to kind of stretch and challenge their way of thinking. And I think in the classroom, I've witnessed some of my students perhaps thrive when I've paired them with AI to do research. And then I've asked them to come up with their own passages and to share them with AI to get responses. And then for them to try to figure out what's real or what's not real. How do you know that this is reliable information? To try to kind of empower them of, you have your own analytical skills, and AI can support you in developing that critical thinking. But ultimately, it's you as the human that has, as you say, the ability to master the platform and to really go with that. So I think maybe about this idea of critical thinking, which we want for all of our children, you know, from any age moving forwards in this digital age. You know, many educators, we do see students who find information instantly, but sometimes they struggle to evaluate it. You know, Johnson, how can parents kind of help develop this critical thinking, specifically in relation to AI and digital information?
I have a very different viewpoint than most other experts. I think I'll use an example. I would say that our parents would often have more insights on things in life than we did when we were young, because they had more life experience, and they had more life experience because they had to go through it. And so what I've learned over time working with students is that, especially the more hands-on projects the students do, the more likely that they will be able to think critically based on their experience, whether something is true or not, and they'll learn to investigate further. And the other thing is, it's important for educators to use inquiry-based learning. So we often say that asking great questions is probably more important than getting the right answers. And so teaching students to ask the right questions, sparking curiosity is key. And that doesn't end in the classroom. I think parents play a huge role as well, and students learn by watching adults. If I, as a parent, just take information from Instagram and TikTok as they are at face value, and I don't investigate, then most likely my boys will also follow me. And it's hard to encourage curiosity if I'm constantly scrolling on my phone, so I'm avoiding uncertainty myself. So I have to lead by example and be very intentional in having these deep intellectual debates and discussions at home, and ask the boys for their opinions, and sharing real stories from our lives. So I think model curiosity out loud and really engaging in discussions with them would really help.
Absolutely. And that really connects so much to what we see in educational settings today. We've used this in the classroom before, where we've pulled up ChatGPT, for example, and we've asked it to be William Shakespeare. And then I've asked the students in the classroom to write down on a Post-it note a question that they would like to ask Shakespeare. and then we've put it into ChatGPT and we've seen what's come up. So we're kind of, using that curiosity, using the platform that's there, and it really sparked, great conversation and great questions, because a lot of the time we're looking and asking students to kind of explore these texts and, as an educator, how to kind of use it in a creative way that's not diminishing, but that's adding value to students' mind and encouraging, as you say, questioning is something that can't be taken away from children and us as humans. That aspect of it is kind of irreplaceable, isn't it? I mean, we're talking here about creativity and emotional intelligence as uniquely human skills, just as asking questions. For some parents and for parents that are worried that AI might make certain abilities obsolete, how would you reassure them that nurturing their child's creative side with AI is okay?
I'll use the example of drawing. I know my boys can draw, but I haven't enrolled them in drawing classes. I am pretty sure if I do so with new drawing techniques that they learn, they will draw even better and draw more. And that's the same thing with AI. What I've witnessed with our students at Voyager is that when we give them the tools, they can quickly prototype and iterate. And so what I'm seeing is that AI doesn't destroy creativity. It gives students new tools to express it. And children are naturally creative. I think they need the space and the tools to express that, both the emotional space and the physical space. Take one of our science projects as an example. We have a fruit battery experiment, and most students would configure the fruits in such a way that the circuit would light up a light bulb and say, cool, it works, and follow instructions, right? But I remember that there's just one group that they took it further and say, well, if fruit works, what about juice? Can we make juice and then power the light bulb with juice? And I was like, that makes a lot of sense. I never thought about it. In a traditional setting, you wouldn't be able to make juice. Your teachers would frown upon that because you have the agenda that you stick to. But in our classroom, we encourage it. We loved it, and so the kids, the children, the students, they squeezed juice into a cup and wired it up. And so we encourage them to ask questions and think outside the box.
Yeah, and I definitely think that is what this digital age that our children are growing up in. My eldest boy is 6 years old, so his experience in this digital age and these practical skills and these creative and critical thinking skills, his experience is different to teenagers, and then that's also different to ours here as an adult. And I think that this kind of integration is neat for children from earlier ages, is showing and demonstrating that they are more coherent and using these kind of AI tools to enhance, I think, their already existing creative and critical skills. Are there any kind of simple activities or approaches that parents can start with at home, kind of regardless? I'm not a technical expert for sure, regardless of their own technical comfort level, so that we can start to begin this fostering of future-ready skills?
Yes, and off the top of my head, I have two ideas. One is bring projects home, and these could be science projects or AI projects that the students can do with the parents together. And I think that in my experience, that has helped my boys to ask questions and to be a bit more hands-on in their experiments. The other tip I have is to bring your work home. In the sense, you are bringing the discussion, the brainstorming, the decision-making home, and brainstorming out loud. So for one issue that I had at work, I remember that I was stuck, and my wife and I would brainstorm out loud, and my son would jump in with his own take. And we could even talk about, okay, how can AI help us with this? And we actually go on the computer and try different things. And so it's very simple and creative, and it was engaging engaging my oldest one in problem solving. So it's not just for school, but it's also for life. And so they learn from that. In terms of the tools, I think once we have a project, or in some cases for schools, we have competitions, then the parents can help the students work together to use AI to solve these problems and encourage creativity and critical thinking.
Yeah, thanks, Johnson. I think the key there is to do it together. I know certainly that when I'm having conversations at home with my husband, my son will be there, and I've heard him say more than once, let's ask ChatGPT. We'll be having a conversation, he'll be listening in, and kind of, we're not asking Google anymore. You know, again, this kind of knowledge and their awareness of these platforms moving forwards. You know, so we'll go on there together, we'll have discussions, and we'll ask questions. I think we're at the zoo and we were talking about how fast, who's faster, a lion or a cheetah, and then trying to kind of get more specific. So I think kind of doing it together and showing that it's not something to be intimidated by. But again, just the togetherness kind of encourages you to learn together. So it's not something that needs to be separate. It's not something to be frowned upon. It's something that we can understand. And I guess as parents and as educators, we also learn how the students and the young children or children are using these platforms, because the way I think is different to the way a child thinks. So when we're witnessing them interacting with it, we're also learning, aren't we, the type of questions and the reasons that they may be asking questions or interacting, which is different from ours. I guess that kind of together and witnessing is helping us all to kind of learn, isn't it, together, and to keep the conversation open, which I think maybe as parents, if anyone's got these kind of concerns about AI and children using it and kind of keeping it closed off and not having an open line of communication with parents or guardians, that, you know, your suggestion there of keeping it together and making it a family thing or a shared experience could be really valuable. I mean, for parents that want to explore, as we said there, with AI, can you suggest something maybe for the young children, maybe say aged 5 to 8?
For younger children, I would suggest that they work on these experiments together, or they can draw guessing games together and use AI to guess what was created. I encourage children to come up with stories and then tell stories around it, use AI to build. But for younger children, I think AI acts more in the background, where they are actually conducting a task and then AI will augment that task. I think these are some of the ways that they could, that parents can bring AI to the learning. I remember there's one story I want to share that I'm very thankful for AI, because my boys are learning Chinese poetry, and some of these are really hard. And so even for me, being able to search online and have ChatGPT analyze every word and explain everything to me allows me to be a better parent, so I can explain it to my boys. So I think it's that doing that together, as you said, and using AI to help them achieve their goals, whether they're drawing, whether they're storytelling, or making music.
Music, yeah, fabulous ideas. I definitely think that I really like that idea of, as an English teacher, stories. And I think we're very much more of visual. We're living in a visual world right now. So, you know, perhaps AI can be a really powerful tool in removing any barriers to learning when it comes to language. With year 12 and 13 media students, we've been discussing and looking at the idea of subtitles and or translation and how that is reducing barriers to learning on the language aspect, but also allowing us to connect more, because it's able to create stories, or as you say, comic books or anything, summaries to essays, summaries of novels that you're reading, and it can produce it in a visual way that's supporting all types of learners, no matter what the age as well. What do you think then about older children, Johnson? Let's say 9 to 15. Are there more sophisticated ways that we could be engaging in AI?
Absolutely. As I've mentioned before, I think one of the key skills that students should learn is Python coding in the age of AI. Python is the language of AI, the bedrock of AI. And so learning Python will help students understand the code behind it and use AI to code. And so students can unlock the potential to automate things and even go into robotics. At Voyager, what we do with Python is that we created a Python course that's monster themed. The theme was having a monster story about their dim sum restaurant. So our premise is if you've had dim sum, you can learn Python. And the students use an AI-powered Python coach to guide the students as they write code and as they ask questions, and it catches the bugs and helps explain things to them. And it really shortens the time for students to learn, because in many coding classes, students would sit in the class and wait for the instructor to help them debug and explain things to them. But with the Python coach, that they can do it themselves, then they're not waiting, they keep learning. The other thing is, I think for older students, they can use AI to learn, I'll call them harder things, like how do you use AI to control a Mars rover robot? How do you use AI to do science simulations? And I think AI really unlocks the capability for us to dive deeper, whereas before it would be very tedious for us to, and that was only like a year ago, but tedious for us to Google certain scientific topics. Now AI can explain it to you and you can customize so that you'll be able to understand the answers.
Johnson, when we're talking here about coding and kind of programming, and I guess like preparing future-ready children, do you think that eventually it will be that students are able to create their own apps within AI? I mean, I feel like I know as a parent that when I'm on Facebook, I quite often see coding, summer programs or opportunities to kind of sign up children to go and learn about coding. But is that something perhaps for older children that demonstrate a skill perhaps with AI? And a lot of students are very in tune because they've grown up in a digital age. When we're talking about coding, does that mean creating apps, or what's the kind of the difference there?
Yes. So in the past, prior to ChatGPT, coding takes a long time and it could be quite dry for many students. It could be quite daunting, especially for students, for some students. And now the goal that I've discovered is that it's not that you want the student to write the entire program from scratch. Maybe in college, yes. If you're in computer science in college, yes, you want to write everything from scratch. But knowing Python, the key concepts allows you to build apps using AI in tools like Bolt, Cursor, etc. And I think that, yes, I'm pretty confident that students aged between 9 to 15 can build their own software prototypes and even deploy these apps. That's totally doable now, thanks to AI.
I mean, I'm sure that all parents can join me here when I talk about Minecraft. Something new to me, I start hearing about Minecraft and Roblox. You know, what are your thoughts on those?
I think let me start with Minecraft. I think Minecraft is very interesting. I mean, with all these software tools and games, I think we should always put a boundary around it, like screen time limitations, and not go overboard. But I do think that there are merits to playing Minecraft. I have seen someone build an entire neural network, a visualized neural network in Minecraft. And I think that would really, if students play that, then they could really understand, oh, this is how CPUs think. This is how neural networks think, and they can explore. For Roblox, it's more of a game, but I also encourage my boys to build games and to use the Roblox Studio to build games. But the other thing, there are 2 points that from a personal perspective, I do want to share. One is we have to be very careful and putting guardrails around the people they'll meet online. I think that's a concern that I constantly have, and I need to make sure that they're not meeting random people and that they're not being bullied online and all that. And second is that with these games, I hope that they can inspire students to build and not just to enjoy and consume, but that these tools will allow them to think, hey, I can build something like that too. Can I use AI? Can I use something else? And so I think I personally like Minecraft more than Roblox, but these are the games that students love these days.
Yeah, thank you. I'm hopeful that many of us are experiencing this kind of influx. You know, Minecraft is everywhere. Can't avoid it at the minute. And I think it's kind of for parents that may not have really understood what they are, that it's kind of useful to understand that. I think it's interesting there, and an important concern that many parents have about privacy and safety when children are using AI tools. Johnson, what guidelines should parents establish?
I think several things. One is you can, for certain AI tools, you can put in system prompts that will put extra guardrails for the users. And so for younger students, that may be appropriate to put in extra guardrails and not for example, for our Python coach, it does not talk about politics. It does not talk about anything else outside of Python coding, and it acts as a coach to encourage the students to focus on coding. The other thing about privacy is that I think it's really important to educate the students so that they don't put private information onto chatbots like ChatGPT or Cloud. Even though these platforms will say they'll never use your information to train, you never know. Machine learning uses data to train the models. So as a precaution, always be mindful of not giving personal information to these large language models, lest they train on it and then somewhere in the world it spits out the same information. I think that would be breach of privacy. If parents are really worried, some schools can also deploy large language models locally. So for my firm, some clients have asked us to deploy large language models on a local hardware, either in their office or in the local premise, so that the data does not leave the premise. And so there, in short, I think that we should be very mindful that these large language models, when we send private data online, we have to be extremely careful and not send it straight to ChatGPT.
Thank you for that. I think it is a real concern, isn't it, about privacy and this kind of move or this transition into a digital age. You know, even from the name that you have, the kind of IP address, when you're signing up, you're giving your age and all these kind of things. So I guess really, how do we teach children to be discerning users of AI, and what does responsible use of AI look like for a child?
I think there when I think about this all the time, and I have two ideas. One is it's not just about AI, it's about any tool in general. There was one time that I caught one of my students using a calculator to do math homework. Okay, so that's not AI, but that has to do with integrity, right? You're doing your math homework, so just, do it by hand instead of using a calculator. So that's, I would say if students want to cheat, like they'll find all kinds of ways to do it. So I think it's really inculcating in them a sense of integrity and moral responsibility. And second is that I think, again, we have to walk with them together and help them understand that certain tools are not 100%. I wouldn't say, I wouldn't use the word safe, but I would use the word like, you have to be mindful of the risk and dangers and concerns around that. And so in our AI course, we always talk about that as a core module in the end of the course, and to talk about the risk and concerns of AI, especially when it comes to, like, for example, going online and looking at deepfake pictures, or can you create a deepfake picture of your friend and make fun of him, right? And I think so. I think like teaching them more responsibility of digital tech use, and being mindful of the risk. I think those two are very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think education is also kind of changing to acknowledge this almost everyday use of AI. So when we're doing essay writing or coursework, trying to instill this integrity in students, that if you have used AI, you need to recognize that and not admit that, but make it known that you have used it, whether that's at a research phase or an editing phase. And I think to, as you say there, about to encourage and enforce this idea of integrity. And a lot of the exam boards also will ask students to sign off an agreement that they have not used AI to kind of plagiarize. So as an educational setting, and exam boards worldwide are adapting their practices, which is then impacting us as educators into what we're kind of seeing in the classroom. I think it's up to us as kind of parents and educators to lead and perhaps be role models on these conversations that we have about responsible AI use, and for us to empower our children to, keep that integrity. For me, sometimes in the classroom, we will have a conversation about ethics, and I'll say, scenario role plays. What if a friend did use AI to draft their coursework? What might go wrong? And then we talk about the consequences of that. And we have this conversation, and then, well, if we're going to use it, how do we use it ethically and morally without impacting or having a negative consequence on your future? And I think that these conversations aren't happening in isolation, as you said repeatedly here, Johnson, that we have them together. Even with siblings at schools, in friendship groups, even parents amongst each other's too. How are you, what are the boundaries or the guidelines that you're using at home? This is what I'm trying. Are you noticing similarities? Because we need to come together as a community, to move forwards together in this kind of transition, to make sure that we're all aligned, safety, privacy, and this kind of hope that educators are evolving and adapting and together, because it's what it is. It's a community, it's families, it's parents and guardians, it's educators, all working together to make sure that we're using these in a functional, safe, encouraging and creative way, and responsibly, I think is, I guess, one of these main things. I mean, I imagine this also ties into helping children understand bias and limitations. I mean, you've mentioned there about deep fakes. We teach that. I teach that to my older students here for part of the A-level media studies. How can parents approach these more complex concepts with children?
This is a very challenging topic, even for AI experts, because we don't have a consensus of what alignment means. And inherently, because machine learning models or these neural networks, they're built on data that humans generated, and humans are biased to begin with, the data would most likely be biased, and therefore the models will be biased as well. I wouldn't, and you can see this when you generate images on Midjourney and other other models as well. When you ask it to generate image of an engineer, like you see someone nerdy, right, or you see a certain gender, etc. So you see these biases. I think one is we have to be mindful of what our biases can be, and spot them when we use AI. Two is that it goes back to critical thinking. Some models may think that CNN is a more credible source than CCTV, and others models may think otherwise. So one way in a corporate setting to reduce biases is to use different models with different biases to debate each other and to interact with each other, so that you can see and think like, okay, what are some of the biases and what are some of the questions we should be thinking about? But this is a very difficult topic for parents to wrestle with. I completely understand. I think one of the first steps, as I said, is to recognize the biases that we inherently have and to spot them when we use AI.
Yeah, thank you, Johnson. I mean, as an educator, I've noticed that students are relying more on AI for homework, say, without kind of engaging in their own thought process. They're missing the core learning objectives. And for parents, at this point, I might suggest that you would say, show me your final draft, or ask them to verbally share their thought process for you to kind of check that thought process mirrors what they've produced. Students want to go out and play, they want to go and have social time. So kind of spending an hour coming up with complex and critical thinking is not there for everyone. So I think maybe for an educator's point of view, when we're looking at homework, it might be a case of, again, for you to just check, what are you doing there? And there's nothing, as I say to my students, for you to write it first and then to ask for feedback or summary points or advice. But you will notice, I specifically noticed that there's certain kind of spellings or Americanisms that are often embedded within the responses that I'll pick up in the classroom. So I think as an educator for parents, perhaps with the older students, when we are looking at kind of homework, and then again, going to AI for valuable and reliable source information, and for it to be used as a drafting or editing tool, that you are kind of asking your child to show you their first draft or to have a conversation with it and look at the end also. And maybe for us to kind of look at this idea of embedding and supporting that integrity. I mean, Johnson, from your experience, you've worked multiple schools. When it comes to homework and AI, is there any kind of framework or strategies, perhaps, other than kind of check-in that you have maybe to support parents?
I would say that one is, if the teacher explicitly says that the homework cannot be done with AI, then I expect my students and my boys to follow that strictly, adhere to that. Second is that there's some homework that may not be as strict. For example, for science, there may be homework that will require them to research about, say, black holes. That's difficult. So they could use AI to help them understand different concepts surrounding black holes. without generating the answers for the homework. So I think it goes back to having that integrity and sticking to the rules. And the second thing I want to point out is that I noticed that sometimes when I brainstorm with other entrepreneurs and business owners, the first thing they would say, and starting in 2025, this is more common. They would say like, oh, we have a business problem. Let's ask AI. And I was like, 2-3 years ago, if we have a business problem, we would first go to Starbucks, get coffee, and then sit down in a room and just hash it out. So we as adults cannot be lazy. And when we show that we're also doing the work, then I think the students would learn from us and follow us.
Yeah, thank you, Johnson. I think we've covered so much valuable ground, and I know that some of you are asking questions. So I think looking at the time, I'm going to share some of the questions with you, Johnson, if that's okay. And this kind of links in directly with what we've just been talking here about AI and homework. So I've got a question here. How can I discourage my child from using AI for their future homework tasks? I know there, Johnson, we've kind of been talking there at the example you propose in terms of the teacher or the school, making it kind of explicit that this is a non-AI supported homework, or what's your thoughts on that?
I think that it has more to do with how do we encourage positive behavior in our children and discourage negative behavior. It's not necessarily AI specific. Just like if they want to do math homework with a calculator, you need to be able to discourage them from doing that. And so I think first is being very clear about the ground rules. Second is being able to monitor their progress. And unfortunately, there's no way to do this easily without like really having someone to check on them and make sure that they don't use AI, and being very clear about the consequences of cheating. Basically, it's not AI. It's basically cheating. And we have to be very clear to the students about that.
Yeah, and I think as educators, we set an allocated time for students to do these tasks, and the expectation is sometimes that the task isn't done online. In English, I might be asking for it to be by hand in an exercise book. And I think maybe, as an educator to parents, think carefully about where in your home you're asking students to complete this. If that's at a table with you in the same room, it's much easier to then allow that autonomy to take place, but for you to be in the room, and maybe sometimes just your presence there can encourage them, as you say, not to kind of go automatically to ChatGPT, to try to have somebody there if they do want to bounce ideas off, then they kind of have that there. There's no easy fix to that, is there? It's kind of more of a collaboration and thinking about where are they. If they're in a bedroom doing it by themselves and that you're not there, you don't know. So I think maybe go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. And if they know that they have to do it in class, and we can explain to them that if you don't know this, you can't do it in class, right? If there's a piece of homework, then you go to class and then you have to expand on that, right? Then they know, oh, now I have to write it. And if I don't know how to write, extend the story, then, I failed the task. So I think also explain to them that for certain tasks, they have to do it in person, as you said, then I think that they'll be more discouraged from using AI to do their homework for them.
Yeah, I think it really does come down to integrity and morals, which is something that is human, that can't be replaced. And I think the more that we focus on that and empowering children, then I think that moral judgment of this, is this the right time to use ChatGPT or AI for this, or is this the wrong time? And try to kind of embed that and empower them to make the right decision. I've got another question here about the idea of AI and multilingual. Do our children need to be multilingual to use AI? AI can do it all. They only need to master one language. What's your thoughts on this? Because obviously coding is a different language in itself.
Yeah, I'm a strong proponent of learning languages, even in the age of AI. Because when you learn a language, it's not just about being able to do business with it. It's also about the cultural context. You're expanding your horizons. And I noticed that when I think about a problem, sometimes I think in Mandarin, sometimes I think in English, and sometimes I think in Cantonese. And there are certain use cases and stories that relate to in their cultural nuances and concepts that are specific to a certain language. So I am a strong proponent of children learning multiple languages if possible. Python being one. I wish I learned French. I think it's about expanding the ability to empathize as well, empathize from people from different cultures, and to think in different mental models. And so I think learn language is not just about communication, but also about sort of expanding the operating system per se.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Another really interesting question here that we touched on just at the beginning about what meaningful kind of job roles, or what is going to be the impact AI is going to have on future jobs. You know, our children are going to be growing up in this AI-dominated world, and rightly so. We're kind of, as educators, we're talking all the time about whether there'll be teachers in 5 or 10 years. You know, what does that mean for our children, and how can we best support them?
I'm very passionate about this question because I think about it a lot. I have students and I also have young children. So first of all, I think teachers are absolutely critical and they will never, ever be replaced. I truly, truly believe that. And I'll tell you why. When I was, sometimes I would go to the classes and go to our classes at these international schools and sit in. What I realized is that, you know, when a kid is distraught, or when a child is sad, when the teacher goes over to that child or student and say, "Hey, buddy, what's going on? Can I help you here?" I think that human touch, that's what I call that human touch experience, not physically touching, but like the soul touching experience, is irreplaceable. AI cannot do that. No matter how much ChatGPT encourages me to be more positive or to be more active in life, ChatGPT itself hasn't gone through the difficulties that I have, right? And the same thing goes with the students in class. So I truly believe teachers will not be replaced. Teachers will spend more time encouraging, inspiring, and challenging the students, and less time on manual labor, like grading and preparing materials and all that. The other professions that it's very hard to predict what professions and roles there will be, but I will say this, there will always be problems. There will always be problems waiting and challenges waiting for people to solve. And if we prepare our students to have critical thinking skills, curiosity, resilience, and the ability to execute on projects and solve problems, I think there will always, always be a role for them to play.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. And if we don't get time to answer your question today, don't worry. We'd love to hear from you after this session. So if you've got any burning questions about AI in parenting or education, please let us know. We'll follow up with a blog post, or if the question deserves a deeper dive, we can even plan another webinar around it. So I guess as we wrap up today's session, I want to extend a big thank you to Johnson for sharing such practical and reassuring insights. I mean, personally, as an educator, I'm really optimistic about what the future entails. I think that it's really going to enhance, not replace, but enhance and offer wonderful opportunities to foster creativity and critical thinking and empower the joy of discovery. So to all of the families here today, you're already doing the most important thing by being here and by asking questions and by staying engaged in your child's learning journey. And remember, you don't have to have all of the answers. You just need to be willing to learn alongside your children, just as we do in classrooms every single day. So as we move forward, I encourage you to approach AI with curiosity rather than fear, and to see it as one more way to engage with your child's interests and learning, and to trust in the partnership between home and school in guiding children through these exciting developments. We truly value your voices as partners in this learning journey, and today's conversation is just one of many ways that we're working to connect with our wider community as we embrace this evolving landscape together. So before we go, don't forget to check out the parenting section on the EtonHouse website. You'll find ebooks, guides, and podcasts on all things parenting. And we'll also send you a recording of today's session. Feel free to revisit or to share it with your friends and your fellow parents. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you leave feeling more confident and equipped to support your children as they grow up in this exciting AI-enhanced world. It's been a privilege, and I've really enjoyed sharing this time with you. So take care, stay safe, and happy parenting. Thanks again to Johnson, and thank you all for sharing this space with us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Gemma.
You're welcome.